What if everything you've been told about who you should be isn't who you truly are? Welcome to Drop the Mask, and I'm Christy. As a warrior of mental health, I created this space for raw, unfiltered conversations about self-discovery, personal growth, and stepping into one's truth. I'm blessed to be able to welcome Lynda Harlos. She's a dedicated sex trafficking abuse prevention educator. As a visionary behind Parent with Purpose, she transforms her personal tragedy into the mission of educating other families so she can shield them from not having the experiences that she has had to walk through. Her commitment to that helped her, I believe, through our conversation, we'll find out, to understand the whole concept of dropping the mask, of being real, but also understanding that sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So welcome, Lynda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Always. Let's start with how this even came about. I know it's not a happy story, but you and I, our faith is very strong, and we also know that God puts us in places that we are just sometimes going, why, what, why me? So
Right.
start wherever you want to start.
Okay. Well, I truly believe that everybody in life has things that they have to go through. Excuse my French, but this is what I say. Everybody has to live. Everybody goes through shit. And it depends what you do with that. That makes the difference in life. And I'm no different than anybody else. We've been through, drug addiction with my son, and my daughter ended up having type 1 diabetes, and we've, other minor things, but then we ended up having a bombshell kind of land in our life. And that was back in 2019 when my daughter come and told me that while she'd been living with her live-in boyfriend, years before that, he had trafficked her. I can tell you that it felt like somebody had hit the slow motion button on my life for about 2, 3 months. I couldn't wrap my head around anything. I knew I was functioning. I knew I was living, but I truly was blindsided because I had no idea how that could have even been possible. My daughter hadn't left the country. And to me, that's what sex trafficking was. You either got kidnapped or went to another country and then couldn't get home and got sold for sex. And my ignorance was obviously very evident because there was no way this could have happened to her. She hadn't left the country. And so then I started doing some work to try to figure out really what happened. I did a bunch of interviews. I used to do a parenting talk show, and my daughter and I both kind of went and hit the floor and started figuring some stuff out. But as she slowly unwrapped her story for me, I finally began to see how, when, where, and why, and saw some of my mistakes in the middle of that. As parents, we're certainly not perfect. We are far from perfect. And it's really hard to have that kind of like right in your face, and there's nothing you can do about it when you realize that your ignorance and your naivety about something was probably why she got trafficked. And man, talk about wearing that mask. I thought I was a good mom, and I am. I was and am a good mom, but I truly believe nothing like that could have happened to us. Why? I don't know. Well, like I said at the beginning, shit happens to everybody. So who are we to say that, something like this shouldn't have happened to us?
Well,
But
people think that those who are trafficked, they're out on the streets. They're
yes,
runaways. They're
yes,
from bad homes. And that's not true. That's not
it,
true at all.
it's not true. There's nothing actually. I mean, they are more vulnerable. Those people are more vulnerable, right? When they don't have a roof over their head, or they have a drug addiction, or they don't have loving parents, or something's happened to them that's really traumatic and they've just never shared it with anybody. Those people are extremely vulnerable. And so, yes, they become easy targets. So how did this happen to a normal family? Those weren't part of our story. But when we really get back into understanding the vulnerabilities, my daughter was vulnerable. We didn't see it. She had been She had been drugged at a party. She'd been gang raped, and she had become pregnant due to that gang rape. And all of her friends did not believe that. So, unbeknownst to us, I mean, we knew about the rape, we knew about the pregnancy. We were here to help her and support her. She, she wasn't going to be out on her own by any means, but we did not see how ostracized she was in her social life. And if you have teenagers at home right now, you know that the only thing that matters to a teenager is their social life. Like the rest of the world doesn't matter to them.
Right.
It's
Right.
just their friends and how many followers they have or whatever the case may be. And my daughter's life literally she felt like it was falling apart. She was fairly popular before all that. I mean, she wasn't, the queen or anything, but I mean, she certainly had enough friends, and pretty much all of them turned their back on her. So yeah, this was something that as a parent, I didn't see that part of it. She didn't share that part of
Right.
that. In my book, Walk a Mile, I actually talk about quite a bit in there how Samantha always did have this way of not being transparent. I'm extremely transparent, have been all my life, and it drove my kids crazy because if I was having a rotten day and somebody showed up at the door, I'd tell them, "Yeah, I had a rotten day. This kid did this and that happened and this broke and blah blah blah," and my kids would be embarrassed and, "Mom, you shouldn't be telling everybody all this stuff." So my daughter, I think, was doing a 180 from her mom, and she was secretive and she didn't tell us a lot. And I mean, there were so many things that we just didn't know that was going on in her life,
Well, it
about
goes back. You don't know what you don't know. And it's
yeah.
tough, especially as a teenager. You don't want to share because you're already being judged by those that you thought were your friends. Well, if they judge me, what's my family going to do?
And
Even
I,
though my mom's transparent and loving and everything, I don't know. So that trust is already broken.
yeah, she already, she didn't tell us about the rape until she was so pregnant that she couldn't hide it
Right.
anymore. So, and she felt that that was her fault, that she had gotten gang raped because she had snuck out to that party and we didn't know about it. So she felt that this was retribution, and she felt that that's what we were going to think as well. And, lots and lots and lots of conversations. And I've told her, I said, there is no reason on this earth for anybody to get raped ever. I don't care what you've done wrong. Rape is still rape. I don't care how you got there. Rape is still rape, and that should never have been done to you. And this isn't payback. The rape wasn't payback. So she got over that, but that took quite a while. But she did. So she did have these vulnerabilities. We are a normal family. We're faith-based. We're community-based. I was volunteering in the community. I was doing all kinds of stuff, probably more than my kids wanted me to do, because I started a bunch of different programs at the school just to make sure I was there and around them and
Right.
offering them the best possible things, when I was running ministries at the church and they were involved in the church. And so, and then we had movie nights, game nights. Like we were, that expression, that $1 million family, right? 4 kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, all that stuff. So that, this shouldn't have happened to us.
Well, because when people are looking out from the outside, they're making their own judgment, and you know what they believe is what they believe. But the
And,
reality is not their. That's their perception. It's not their reality.
right. And in all honesty, I mean, regardless, I mean, even though we had some drug addiction that we were dealing with our son, and even though we had, the juvenile diabetes and, the groundings we had to do and all the things you have to do with kids, I still felt that we had a really great family life. I was very grateful for everything, constantly, just thanking God for all of the blessings that I had. And then this happened, and I can tell you, it took me a while to not judge myself because I thought, what did I miss? What did I do wrong? We did miss stuff, but I can't, nobody's perfect, and I have no idea how I should have known about sex trafficking. But if I had, I know she probably wouldn't have been trafficked, but I don't know how I would have known that because there was nothing
And what would you
out.
have said? Oh, can we have a cup of coffee? And are you being trafficked? I mean, how would you have approached that? I mean,
Well, it's not even the point of whether or not you would bring up that conversation. It's a point that back then that conversation wasn't even
right,
talked about
right,
anywhere. We didn't even know to ask that question.
right.
What we taught our kids was stranger danger. Right? That was about it. And cell phones and and laptops and stuff were just starting to become part of the equation. So we were just starting to learn about the dangers online. But now those conversations are being held, all the time. I'm doing conversations like this all the time to bring awareness to what this is. But I'm not the only one. There's thousands of us now out there talking about that, where when I went back and looked to see if I could find something way back then, I couldn't find anything on YouTube or anywhere that would have been able to have educate me on this. And that's no excuse. I mean, we still need to be diligent in finding out what's going on in the world so we can protect our kids, but we can't do it all. And so I do
Do
not
you,
crucify
do you
myself for
still do you
this.
still carry around that guilt?
I
Are you
don't.
okay?
I don't. I just know that that is the reason she was trafficked, is our naivety. But I'm aware, you and I talked about this before. You don't know what you don't know,
Right,
and you can't do anything about something that you don't know about. I can tell you what it has done is made me very much aware that I need to get out there and make sure that nobody else has this that they have to live with.
right,
But it also has made me really make sure that I've paid attention to what's going on in the world and be a little more proactive, instead of just staying behind my four little walls where it's safe and comfortable, and making sure that I am staying on top of things so that I can hopefully be a little more proactive going forward for things. And so, I mean, since all of this has happened, I mean, tons and tons and tons of podcasts are out there on almost any topic. So now you have the option and the opportunity to get out
right.
there and educate yourself. There's no reason for anybody to be naive in just about any subject. However, it does go back to, again, the thing: you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you're supposed to know it. So being able to, I like to say, pull your head out of the sand and look around you instead of staying in your own four walls, and start realizing some of the stuff that's going out there, and having conversations with your kids. And so we have conversations with our kids about a lot of things that I don't like. I don't like the
Or
political
you probably
conversation.
never would have thought about having them with your own parents. So you're breaking that cycle that our
Yes.
parents had the same, with their parents. And now it's like, wait a minute, we need to have these conversations
Mhm.
because this is real life situations.
Yep.
Now, do you feel that, and the whole reason of why I do the drop the mask is just like you, I'm very transparent. What you see is who I am, and I'll probably vomit my whole life story when we first meet because that's just who I am. I want you to know all the dynamics, and if you judge me, that's on you, not me, because I've had to walk that path of why are they judging me, blah, blah, blah. Now, dropping the mask, and it's allowing people to know that they're not alone
Mhm.
and that somebody else has had experience, and to be able to feel comfortable to be with their vulnerability, which is a powerful place to be,
Mhm.
is when we're vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that before you had children, when you were younger, because I know for myself, I was so heavy because I was heavy with the depression of wearing so many masks of who I felt that I needed to be for society, for my parents and everything. How do you feel that from going backwards to where you became and to where you're at now, if that makes sense?
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think that I wore masks, Christy, because when you first came to me about this, I remember I do a walk every morning, it's my prayer time, and I remember praying, God, should I be doing this? Because, like, did I wear masks? And then the more I started thinking about it, and the more I'm praying about it, I'm realizing that, it's not. I wouldn't maybe have used the word masks, but I certainly had an idea of who I thought I was, or what the way my life was. And when suddenly, in several different circumstances in our life, like having a drug addict, having a child who was a drug addict, I mean, that was hard to live with, and that was hard to own that, and that was hard yeah, that was the reality that we had to live with. And even though it wasn't me that was a drug addict, it was my child.
Right.
And suddenly, I'm not the little Miss Perfect that sometimes even I thought I was, because I did make a lot of the right choices growing up. I had some things happen to me when I was younger that were not my choices. But when I got to the point where I understood that my choices would lead me down certain roads and the consequences, I started making really good choices. So I felt a little bit like I was up on a pedestal maybe. And so something like this shouldn't have happened to me because I made right choices. Why didn't my kids make right choices? And man, I can tell you, the mask that I guess I wore was of just assuming that because I was their parent, they weren't going to make mistakes because I had learned how to make the right choices, even though
I bet
bad
you a
stuff
lot of
happened.
parents I bet you a lot of parents can sit back and say that. Now, I don't have children, but I can say that on other situations that, you know.
Yep. And we don't, and that's the beauty of who we are as human beings. And that's God has made us all very, very different. And I can tell you, my relationship with God did not get really strong until I had kids. And I started to realize that we will, regardless of how our kids behave, how they react, the bad choices that they make, we will still love them no matter what. And that helped me understand God's love. And
Mhm.
I, like nothing else ever had before in my life. And I realized that my kids literally could do anything and I would not turn my back on them. And that's powerful.
It is.
It is. And I don't think I would have ever been able to get to the place where I am in my faith today if I didn't have a child who was a drug addict and realized, we'd been through the rehab. On the third time, I said to him, I said, I'm not enabling you anymore. I'm not paying your bills anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. But here's what I will do for you. Other than pray for you, I will find you once a day and I will feed you. And it will kill me, but that is what I will do for you. And
Well, isn't that a form of
it's
tough
exactly what
love?
that is, and I can tell you
Yeah.
that is sometimes the things that we need the most to kick us out of our
Yeah.
lethargic thought, that we can still keep doing what we're doing, we can still keep, running down the same path that we're running down, and I'm not saying that my statement is what fixed him or made him, wake up or change the course of his life. Um, I think it was one of many things. I think that's the beauty of God. I think he pulls the resources at the right time when somebody's ready, their heart is softened. And there'd been so much prayer put in that long before I made that statement that anybody that was in his life, hopefully would be an influence and stop him. But yeah, the mask that I was wearing, the vulnerabilities that I was having was believing that I was untouchable. And I don't mean that to sound as as I'm not even sure what the word is. And it was only because I felt I had made such good choices in life. And I did that on purpose because I looked around me and I learned from the mistakes of other people. Man, I'm not doing that. I don't want that to happen to me. And then lo and behold,
Right.
you have kids in your life that going, yeah, so I'm going to try some drugs or I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. I'm going to sneak out to a party. I'm going to, and my husband and I never did that. So we have gotten to the point now where we're realizing that everybody's journey is their own journey, and it doesn't matter. I mean, and I had the two kids. I mean, I have four kids, but the two kids in my life that taught me the most about God's love were put in my life to teach me about God's love, to knock me off that
But
pedestal.
God breaks people. I mean, look what he did with David. I mean,
Yeah,
God, and that's, we're all
we are.
broken. We're all flawed. We, when I think of a human being, I just feel like all these cracks
Mm,
all over us. I mean,
mm,
but the light can be shown into those
yeah.
cracks through all the darkness that we always carry, because we do carry darkness even if we've had a good life. There are Nothing's
Nope.
perfect. Not every day is going to be
Right.
fabulous. um, but us dropping a mask and understanding that it's not our place to judge other people, and all we can do is share our story, educate other people that if, God forbid, that they have to go through something like this, they know where they can reach out. Um, you can get all the research you want. That doesn't mean that's not going to still
Oh,
not happen.
exactly. No, that is absolutely true. But having knowledge is power as far as prevention. So we are aware of that, and so that's I truly would. But if it hadn't have been that, it might have been something else, and that's the thing. It's not that it was trafficking or that I was naive and wasn't able to stop it. It's that this happened, that something happened, bad things happen. And I've always said, for as long as I can remember, that, shit happens. And it's how we react to stuff that makes a difference. And no matter what happens in your life, it can make you better and better. And it's your choice which way you decide to go with that. And so doing podcasts like this, as far as I'm concerned, Christy, is making it better. Like, this is, you're choosing to do with whatever has happened in your life to make you better and to make other people better, and instead of sitting in that and being bitter. And that's most of that is thanks to God, as far as I'm concerned, because that's, at least in my life, there always felt like there was redemption, even though I had a lot of people around me, especially when I started publicly talking. I mean, you could see in the audience the ones that are kind of glaring at you and going, well, you must have done something. You're not telling us the whole story. And you just, there's redemption in that, because I know that God is not judging me about that, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm okay with the people that are judging me on that. I don't like it. I can tell you, I don't like it, because I am, unfortunately, and it's another mask that I've had to drop over the years, is that I have been a people pleaser for a big part of my life, and I felt like I needed
Yep.
to be that person that they thought I was supposed to be. I was the good little mom, and I was the good little wife, and I was the good little deacon at the church, and I was the good little, ministry leader, and
Right.
all these things. And I enjoyed doing all those things. So to me, I didn't see those as masks, and they weren't masks living through it. But I think it, regardless of the fact that I enjoyed them, regardless of the fact that I chose to do those things,
You were doing it for everybody else to see you in a certain
there's a
way.
slight part of it that this
Mhm.
becomes who you are, and this is a good thing, so look at how good I am, and look at my persona, and
Right.
look at, I'm shining a light on parenthood, and I'm shining a light on being a Christian, and I'm shining a light, instead of just doing my journey and doing it with grace, which,
Yeah, but who teaches that? We can only teach it through our experiences, our what we experience when we have to get down on our knees and just say, okay, I see, because we do tend to, I believe that we do tend to see that we do certain things for the affirmations on the outside, going, hey, I'm great at this and I'm good at this. And yeah, it is part of our
mhm,
ego.
absolutely.
But to now get rid of the ego and get rid of, I'm doing this because I enjoy
Mhm.
this and it's who I
Yes.
am. If you judge me, that's on you. Go look in your own mirror, which you probably are. That's the reason why you're judging me. And I'm just enjoying my life because it's my path. But it's a very hard, I'm 63. It's taken me until I was 60 to finally get into that place where I am I'm solid of where I'm at. And when somebody judges me, I ask them
Mhm.
why. Now, again, I have no problem asking questions where it's like, or vomiting my life, but it's like, why are you asking this? What is your reasoning because of your reasoning of even asking this?
Right. And I think the question why is one of the biggest questions out there. My son and I were having a conversation a little while ago. In my childhood, I didn't get a lot of words of affirmation. I was basically, and this isn't a woe is me, because this is not what this is meant to be at all. But I was basically
Right.
treated as a slave from the age of 13 until 18, because mom and dad had split up, and my mom still had two little kids at home. So I was her babysitter, I was her cook, I cleaned the house, all that stuff. Didn't get a lot of words of affirmation. And I think when I went out into the world and wanted to do my own things, a big part of why I was trying to be so perfect is because I was looking for somebody to say you did a good job, or you're a good
Yeah.
person, or you're this, or
Of
you're that.
course.
And it is very important for me to be a good person. And that's the Christian in me. That's the upbringing of, choose to be Christ-like. That's what my choice is. So my son and I were having this conversation, and he had said to me, he goes, Mom, you are who you are because of who your mom was. I said, yeah, for a while I was. You're right. But I got to a point somewhere in my life where I realized that even though I originally started being a good person for those words of affirmation, I still really believed inside that I was supposed to be a good person. And so when I do something good, even though I still appreciate words of affirmation, I'm not doing it for the words of affirmation. I'm doing it because I know it's the right thing to do. And the way I know that is because I can ask the questions why. Why am I doing this? Because your why is the most important question you can ask yourself in anything that you're doing in life. And if you will be honest with yourself, I think
And that's tough. A
it's
lot of
it's
it's
really,
a tough place to
it's
be
really tough.
because there you're getting down to that darkness
Yes,
going, "Oh, okay."
right. And I mean, there was lots of times I did it because I was, waiting for my husband to notice that I did something, or I was waiting for my pastor to notice that I did something, and I was waiting for those words of affirmation. And that's not wrong, as long as that's not your primary why.
Correct.
If your love languages is getting filled, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's the only reason you're doing it, then there's something wrong with doing that. And for a long time in my life, it was because my love language is words of affirmation, because I never got it as a kid. That was my main motivation for
Those are
years. And when I woke up and realized that that's what I was doing, I was horrified. I'm like, oh my God, no, I should be doing things because it's just the right thing to do, and in whatever the circumstances would be, right? And then I realized, even though I wanted the words of affirmation, deep down, I was doing things because I knew it was the right thing to do. That's the way I was raised. That was my Christian beliefs. I truly believe we're supposed to be spending every single day of our lives going, what would Jesus do? Jesus, what would you have me do today? What can I give you today? We're supposed to be constantly doing that. And so I've been raised since 4 doing that. This is just second nature to me. So it's not wrong for me to be who I am and be doing the right things. And I don't need to feel guilty that if I actually enjoy the words of affirmation as well. And that took me way too long to figure that one out.
that's a that's a exactly. That's just a
It is.
plus. I mean, that's why I spent my life always looking outside of myself because I wanted the affirmations. I wanted to feel that people liked me and loved me
Yes.
and you're the best and oh, you do great. And then when I started realizing, well, I have to like myself first. I have to love myself. And then, and society tells you not to do that because that's
Yes.
selfish or,
Ego.
and yeah, but it's not
No,
an
it's
ego
not.
thing. It's you have to know
Yeah.
yourself. And so, yes, I love affirmations. I love when people go, "Oh my gosh, Christy, you did a
Yeah.
good job."
Yeah.
Thank you. I worked hard on that. I think I did a good job too. Actually, I know I did a good job, but
Yeah.
thank you. Because it's not looking out for their approval, just saying, "You did a good
Yeah.
job." You look nice or, but learning how, and I think this is hard for women when somebody says, "You did a great job," or, "Oh, you look nice." Oh, you just
I
say
know.
thank you. You
I
say
know.
thank We feel that we have to
I know.
justify why we did a good
Yeah.
job, why we did it, because that's how I think that I don't know if it's how society or how we were brought up or whatever. We're not supposed to have those words of affirmations. We're just supposed to do.
And it
And yet there are love
Yeah,
languages.
there are, yeah, and I think that book, The 5 Love Languages, is really kind of where I started actually being released from the guilt of needing words of affirmation, because I was raised that that makes you a very selfish person. If
Right.
you're looking for approval, then you're not doing things for the right reasons, and so therefore you must be a bad girl because you shouldn't be doing it that way. You just should be a good girl because that's what you're supposed to do. And that's
Right.
true. I mean, we really should be doing the right things because that's the right things to do. But in the long run, we are still human beings and we still like our husbands to tell us that we look gorgeous today. We still want our kids to say, Mommy, I love you. You're adorable. Our kids are still looking for
Right.
those words of affirmation from us and saying, That was such a great job. Thank you so much for helping, or whatever. Those And the fact that we feel like we have to justify that means that we're actually in a society right now where we actually put judging people as more important than just praising them. Why can't we just praise people?
Okay, well, so as you said, excuse your French, our society is so
It
fucked
is.
up. It's
It is.
disgusting. it's just and my question is, who makes those rules? Who makes those? It's like, let's break these rules. Let's just people be human beings, be good people, and love themselves and love others. I mean, but I know that's not going to ever be broken. I mean,
No,
because even back in the
not in
Bible,
this
it's
lifetime,
not.
right?
Well, yeah, and
But
but people are waking up, going, well, wait a minute, no, I don't need that in my life just because society tells me I have
that's
to.
right.
I mean, we people hide behind their masks because they're afraid to be judged. They're embarrassed. Um, they're afraid. They're in fear. And I'm big about. I used to live in fear.
Mm,
Well, okay, I'm moving to another city. Nobody's going to like me, or I can't get a job. Blah blah
mhm,
blah. Now it's like, how can I be in fear when I don't know what's
right.
forward? And God's with
Well,
me.
the
If it's
unknown is what actually makes a lot of people be fearful, I know. But
yes,
as Christians, if our, he has our path all figured out for us. So, I mean, even if for some reason we're not in his will per se, he still knows that we're going to do that and screw up, and he's still got a way out for us. He always does. We just have to ask
yep,
for it. So that's. But getting back to the masks of people just feeling like they're going to be judged for whatever is going on in their life or whatever has happened. I think, and that and okay, so being married to a man who has been charmed, and you and I talked about that before as well. My husband is charmed. He didn't come into our marriage with any baggage. I was his only girlfriend. I was his first kiss. I was his first love. Um, his parents adored him. He was the only boy in a European family, and they tried several times to get a boy. So he was adored. That the sun rose and set on this boy. He had words of affirmation like crazy. He wasn't great in school, but he wasn't criticized because he wasn't. And so he came into my life as a very charmed individual. And he still tends to be judgmental of other people. But I said to him, I said, the one thing that taught me when I started realizing why is he the way he is, and it's because he's had those words of affirmation. He had unconditional love poured out on him daily. And I've thought about that so much and realized that, man, if I, rather than sit there and look at somebody or even him, I mean, it's so easy for me to sit there and look at him and go, yeah, well, you don't have a clue because you're so charmed. Instead, it's because that's a judgment all on its own. It's a judgment, even though it's not a harsh one, it's still a judgment. I try to go, you know what, sweetie, you are so fortunate to be able to have this, and you're blessed, and you have so much that you can offer other people. And if we could learn what the minute we want to judge somebody is to turn that around and make that a compliment, a positive something, somehow find
absolutely.
something positive to say about somebody, this world would be such a better place. And honestly, we as individuals feel better when we can say something positive about somebody instead of backstabbing them or talking about them behind their back.
It's the energy. It's
It's
the
the energy.
energy. So if
Yeah,
you put out the negative energy, you're going to have all that
yeah,
negative. But that's the whole thing. Is like, your situation, my past situations, you have that choice to take a negative
absolutely.
and looking for the positive. You can look at the blessings. You can say, okay, this was a shitty time in
Yeah,
my life, but I see where I've been able to go
yeah,
forward with what I went
yeah,
through, and to be able to not put on the veil, put on the mask, or not feel that if I talk, somebody's going to judge me. And it's still a hard place to be because we're
yeah.
human, and we're so used to being in the negatives.
We are.
Everything's negative news, everything's
We are.
negative.
Yep. And that's the way the
Um,
world is, though, right? It's negative. It
yeah, it
is.
is. And it wasn't created to be that way. However, there was a lot of negative in the
Yep.
Bible. There's a lot of negative in the Bible. And to understand, the stories behind it, um, and why, I don't go to church, but my faith and my relationship with God and Jesus is very
Me
strong.
too.
I read the Bible. morning, at nighttime, and that's my quiet time. I just sit there, and I might not understand all the passages, so I'll ask. I'll ask God to put me through. I've unfortunately gone to churches where they're the most judgmental people I've ever seen in my life. and it's sad because I understand church is just a
Mhm.
building, but it's about the fellowship and the family. And I've learned that some people, when I share about my faith and everything, well, I don't believe in that. Well, that's okay. I'm not, it's like politics. I'm not, telling you you have to believe what I
Yep.
believe in. The reason is my 20 years of having this relationship has changed my life, even through some really, really shitty times. Because when you have that light and you can give it up to God, you feel that
You do.
lift. And then you know that you can go forward and share your experiences and be transparent, and be raw. And that's where people are scared. They are so scared to be that way. And you sharing your story, um, and for the fact that your daughter jumped into it at the beginning and was just like, look, I want to share this. And then you continued to go forward. That's the path that you had to go on. And I hate to say had to. I mean, you didn't have to, but it was the path that was written for
Well,
you.
it's the path that I think he wanted me to go on. So being as, faith-based as I am, that was my path. I know that I struggled even with that part of it and the judgment of people because so many people thought I was exploiting her by going out and telling the story when it wasn't my story. So I start every presentation.
Actually, it is your story.
A big part of this is my story, absolutely.
It
But
is
I
your
do
story.
also, at the beginning of any presentation, I do make sure that the audience is well aware that my daughter is well aware of what I do, and she gives me her blessing. In fact, she keeps telling me,
Yeah,
"Mama Bear, you go fight the fight," and that is permission to tell her part of this story. But a big part of this, most of this, is mine. When I'm teaching
right.
somebody about what sex trafficking is and how it happened to her, then that part is hers. But I'm out there because it's my story. I We didn't see it. We didn't know. I don't want anybody else to put their head in the pillow at night with that being the reason somebody they know and love gets abused or trafficked. So, but getting back to what you were talking about, I think what happens, at least for me, and I talk a little bit about this in my book, I tend to not even, I don't have a heavy weight on me during the time. I did for those 2 or 3 months. Like I literally felt like somebody had hit the slow motion button in my life.
Shock.
But I didn't, and I think that was God's grace, to be quite truthful with you. I think for some reason it was so traumatic for my brain to think about it that I didn't. I just didn't think about it. I didn't realize I didn't even think about it. And or my subconscious was doing it. I just went about life, and every day was a new day. And every day not that I ignored it, I just didn't know what to do with it. So I didn't do anything with it. And none of that was a conscious thought. And I think that's what happens with a lot of us when we go through something that's extremely traumatic is we go through these sections of our life where God literally is just carrying us and we don't even realize it. I read this story years ago. She turned around and there was only two sets of footsteps. Before that there was, yeah, or two feet. The path was her and God walking together. And then she turned around and looked, and there was only his footsteps, and that's when he carries us. And we don't know what that's
Yep,
going to look like for us individually as individual people, because sometimes it's just crying all day and somehow still getting enough money in our house to pay the bills or whatever, because we don't even know how we got to work or if we got to, because we're in such a traumatic state that God's just holding us. And when we look back
yep,
at it, people go, well, how did you get through that? I have no idea. I have no idea. I just know I did. Here I am.
yep.
And that's, if we could do that for other people, man, what a great world this would be, right? Just come alongside somebody when they're going through something difficult and be able to pick them up and help them. I mean, we can't. Unfortunately, that's just not in our capability as human beings to do. But that we can come alongside them and say, you know what, I'm praying for you, I'm here for you, how can I talk, what do you need? And 99% of the time
Sure. They might they don't know
they
what they
don't know.
need. They just need to know somebody's
And
there.
that's enough. And if praying for them so that, God's angels are around them and protecting them and helping them. But then when you get on the other side of that, this is where, like, are you going to let this make you bitter or better? Right. So you'll go through that time where you just don't know how you even got through it. Like, you just don't. And those of us who are faith based truly understand that was 100% God. Um, and that's all well and good. But then when you get beyond that, what do you do with that? Um, you know that it was God that helped you, but what do you do with that? And that to me is where that's what you're doing is so important, and
True.
what I'm doing is so important, because we make it so that the next person who's going through something like this doesn't feel alone, doesn't feel like this is
Yeah.
only happening to them, and then get to the point where mentally they are so distraught that maybe there's suicidal thoughts, or feeling like they're unworthy for love from anybody, including
Yep.
God. And so
Yep.
I think that's when we get beyond those points. And I mean, sometimes even when we're in the middle of those points, because I think, Christy, that's, you're sometimes in the middle of stuff and you're still fighting the fight,
Yep.
right? I wasn't for 2, 3 months. I just kind of went into a state of, I don't know, I'll call it comatose, because I don't know what else to call it. I don't even remember it. I have no idea how I got through those 3 months, but that's where the grace of God comes in. And that's where we're then at that point when we get out of it, we're supposed to be there to help other people. So I'm so grateful for what you're doing, because this is the
Yeah.
part that's important. So
God told me to. That's one thing. I might not listen to other people,
that's a good thing.
especially when they say you can't do
Mhm.
this. Okay, watch me. But it kept on coming to me. Um, People were telling me to write a book of my life and everything, and I'm like, no, I need other people's stories. My stories are, yeah, I have lots of them, but other people's stories, it's like I can relate, and it helps me get through what I could be going through, or help somebody I'm coaching, um, to know that the struggles are
Yeah.
out there. Mental health, because I am such a warrior for men's mental health right now. I struggled with depression since I was 8 until I was about 40, and thought about committing suicide 3 times, and moved every 2 to 4 years, and the drugs, this everything. Um, the statistics that I read the other day, it's 40% of men over 50 have tried to commit
Wow.
suicide.
Wow.
And women, we can talk to people. We can, we're the
Yeah.
caretakers. Men are set up, and that's the only word I can say, is they're set up to be
Stoic.
the strong
Stoic. Yeah.
ones and
Yep.
all that. We're the ones that we can go out and have a glass of wine with a girlfriend and bitch and complain, blah, 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 blah,
Yep.
blah, and do all the talking. Men
Yeah.
don't. And they don't even feel that they can share it with their friends, because the judgment, or you'll be weak,
Yeah.
and that. Your husband is one of the rare ones that have been
Yeah.
charmed. Um, and but God created in that
Hmm.
way.
Absolutely.
And he's got his purpose, just like you and I have our purpose, and as well as everybody has a purpose in this our
Yep.
life, and we don't know the plan.
No.
We don't know the plan. We can say, okay, I want to do this for a living, and it might go fabulous or it might not, but every walk is a new
Hmm.
moment. And we can make a choice that we might think that is the right choice, but it's not really in our power, because something might come into our way that's going to sidetrack
Right.
us from that right
Right.
choice. And when we look outside of the box, over the box that we're living in, your 4 walls, however you want to look at it, we can see a clearer picture of everybody else and their
Yep.
struggles, and not have to look in our mirror going, well, it's about me and I've struggled the worse than you. No, we all have different struggles. We all, so if we're raw, if we're transparent, um, other people are going to feel safe
Yes.
around you
Yes.
to be able to say, hey, I have something that's on my heart that I've never told somebody. And I just feel safe with you.
Yes.
And you being up on stage and sharing this with family members, I'm sure there's many people out there going, I want to sit and talk to her.
There have been some. I'm also, you know, some of the places where I've been speaking, it's been a little difficult for people to do it, but there have been some, and then there'll be some that will reach out to me by email. But I think a lot of them don't in a popular setting like that, because they're afraid of the people who are going to judge them for coming up and talking to me in the first place.
Exactly.
So it becomes a stigma
Exactly.
that way for them as well, which is really hard. And I always encourage everybody, you know what, if you want to reach out to me, please email me. But just come and talk to me, or say, Lynda, I'd like to have a coffee or a Zoom meeting or whatever. But yeah, for the few that have actually had the courage to come up and talk to me after a presentation, I can tell you it does my heart really, really good, because those are the ones that affirm that what I'm doing is working. Like, they're the ones that are coming to me, oh my goodness, I didn't realize, and this was happening and I wasn't sure. Or I had one woman, she was in her 40s, and she said, this happened to me. She was telling me about it. She goes, and I really wasn't sure what it was, and she stopped it before it became trafficking. But she said, after listening to you, I realized that's what this was, and thank God, because now I know, and I can, when you hear those
Right.
stories, when people come up to you and will just tell you that something you said or did helped them, it makes it all
Mhm.
worthwhile, right? So you can only imagine what they must be going through when they're listening to a story and they're realizing that they're not the only one, or that, oh my God, this that I resonate with that. I feel that because of, and it may not be the same story, it might be something different, but they understand that vulnerable piece, because you have to stand
Right.
up on stage and tell everybody, you have to let yourself be very, very vulnerable. And
But people think vulnerability is a weakness. It's not.
it's not
It is not.
it's not it can be, but it's that word in of itself is not necessarily negative. It's a
Mm-mm.
state. It's a state of the way you are. And I'm extremely, I mean, I said it even in my TED talk. Like, I stood up there being vulnerable in the hopes for change. I'm not doing
Yeah.
this because I want to stand up on stage and get everybody to know me. I'm doing this
Right.
because I want people to know what this is, so this doesn't happen to them. I want there to be change in the world. And
And that's where you're being courageous to make that bold statement of being
yeah,
vulnerable, of being powerful.
yes, and I think every single human being has courage in them. I
Hmm.
believe that we're all given a measure of courage, and the people who haven't been able to tap into that yet, I think that they will when they start watching things like this. Christy, this is what gives people courage. This is what makes people realize, I'm not alone. She did it, I can do it. And that's, we all have courage. We just have to figure out how to tap into it. So,
And a lot of people don't think it's that important to share. Like, well, mine isn't as traumatic as that person. It doesn't matter. Everybody's life is of an experience that is going to resonate with
yep,
somebody
our journey.
else. And absolutely. And when we hide behind our masks, we're alone. Even though we might be surrounded a whole bunch of
Hmm.
people, we're
Hmm.
alone. So, I was having a conversation with my first guest, Christina, and we were talking about how she puts a veil on, different places. And afterwards, I'm like, do I put a veil on? And I'm like, no, I don't. Because I remember how heavy those masks were and how dark it was for
Hmm.
me. But maybe that there's sometimes I don't need to vomit my
Yes.
life or be a little bit more tactful. I don't know. I'm old. I mean, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But I for me, it's just I want people to feel powerful through every good, bad, and truly shitty experience that they've had. Because what's going to make them powerful is that truly shitty experience.
Yes, it is.
And whether it's a rape, you know, prison time, being trafficked, having a family member with drug issues, or being trafficked, um, just understanding that it's happening. You know, people always say, "Why is this happening to
Mm-hmm.
me?" And you know, people might disagree with me. You have a choice of being a victim or a valor.
Yep.
You can stay in that victim
Yep.
mode. You can say, "Hey, a poor pitiful me, I'm in this victim," and I get it. You can do that. I've had situations where, you know, I should have played victim mode, but I didn't like the
Yes.
darkness, and I kept on wanting to get out of that
Yes.
darkness. So it's going forward and saying, how can I grow through this? You can always, and I use always because I look at my own experience, take a negative and find those blessings and see that
Yep.
light.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're doing. I mean, so if a young girl came up to you and you felt that there's a mask on, what would you say to her?
The number one way I usually approach anybody is just by asking a lot of questions, because you don't, especially if they're wearing masks. There's usually a reason why they're doing that, and sometimes most of the time it's to protect themselves, and so they really don't want you prodding into their life because they're trying to protect themselves. So at that point, I think I would probably just be asking a lot of questions, and I think I've learned in life. I am a coach as well, and I've learned through the coaching program that questions actually start opening doors, because you begin to understand who the person is, what makes them tick, what makes them scared. And you can't always get to the core of some things just by asking questions, but you can at least have a starting point. And if they don't answer the questions, they're not ready to talk to you. But if you've asked the questions, they know that you're interested. And there's nothing more that you can do for another human being but let them know that you're there for them and that you're interested in them. So asking a question lets them know that. And then if they don't answer, say, you know what, no problem. When if you want to talk or you want to answer that question, just let me know, reach out to me. And sometimes you can't help somebody who's wearing a mask because maybe
Yeah,
they're not ready for whatever. But questions are always my
exactly.
go-to, Christy. They're always my go-to when somebody is just, and just, this sounds really stupid, but I walk every day and I have 2 or 3 people over the last 5 years that I finally got to say hi to me. I say hi to them every time and I'm smiling, and they just don't. Their heads down, And one's a grumpy old Italian man, and now he stops and talks to me all the time. And so I think just being present,
Mhm.
being there, and letting people see you, saying hi, how's your day? I don't care, anything, or like what you and I do, letting people see us and see what we're doing. But you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing. It just We don't need to do a big parade. We don't need to be doing big gestures. We just need to be there, and we just need to let them see us that we're there. Um, and the
Yep.
less intrusive you are, the more trustworthy you are. So I think it's really important. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a family where we were supposed to shove Christianity down everybody's throat. And we were supposed to
No,
stand in the
no.
street corners, and we were supposed to, do all of this to make everybody in the world a Christian. And I can tell you that turns more people off than anything. And I have decided years ago, like I'm not against the church. I'm against some of the people that are in the church that are more judgmental than the people outside of the church. A lot of pastors
Yep.
are really, really
Yep.
great, but it's the congregation. And I know that, we're all on our journey, we're all learning. But what I don't want to be is that person who my faith is the only thing that somebody knows me by. and feels
Right.
like they can only come and talk to me if it's about my faith, because that's not the truth. We, as Christians, we are living everyday lives. We are going through stuff just like everybody else is, and sometimes maybe even worse. Everybody's journey is different. Uh, but when it comes right down to it, I want them to look at me and say, you know what? Somehow she's still surviving. How is she doing that? And
Yes.
then you share why or how. But until then, you're just there for people. Like you're just there for people. You don't need to shove anything down anybody's throat, including our own kids. Believe it or not, that was one of my biggest mistakes as a parent, is just feeling like I constantly need to parent them instead of being there more just to have conversations with them. We weren't raised that way. We were raised. I mean, I'm the same age as you are, so we were raised. You do what you're told. You do, but you don't speak. Like you're in the room, but and we didn't have conversations. We just didn't. Yeah, I should have had a lot more conversations with my kids. I had a lot more than my parents had with me, but
Well, it's tough. We can sit and do the coulda,
oh,
woulda, shouldas.
absolutely,
Believe me, that's to me, I'm learning is just a waste of a conversation in your
it
head.
is.
It just,
Unless you're
you
learning
can't do
from
the
it.
coulda, woulda,
If
shoulda.
you're learning from it,
Well, I've
then it's a
got
good thing to do. Self-contemplating about what it is that you did wrong so that you can do better moving forward is the only time that it's a good time to talk about that. But
right. Well, you're using it as an experience. So anyway, for too long, we have worn masks to fit in, to be accepted, to keep the peace, hiding parts of ourselves to appease others. Um, but what happens when we finally drop the mask? You never know. You might not realize how you can help another by telling your story, sharing your story, and most of all, having empathy
mhm.
and no judgment. So, Lynda, it's been a blessing. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Christy. As always, it's a pleasure, my dear.
Absolutely.